They were bound by fate, but torn apart by tragedy. In the beginning, their lives wove together seamlessly, like threads in a delicate fabric, each one essential, each connection so precisely placed that one could almost believe it was all meant to last forever. But nothing lasts forever, not when shadows lie just beneath the surface. Their story, as many would recall, was that of unlikely companions, a kindred connection that few could define but many envied. They shared a bond, a thread woven so tightly that one might think it had always been there, hidden in the fabric of their lives, waiting to be discovered. Friends, some would say. Others might have called them soulmates. But names are rarely enough to capture the essence of such a connection. They weren't like the rest. They were something different, something more. To the world, they appeared like any two people who'd found common ground, shared experiences, mutual laughter, and secrets exchanged in the quiet hours. But beneath the surface, something else was taking shape. An invisible current that seemed to tug at the edges of their lives, drawing them closer to something unseen. Perhaps it was the shared pain they carried, or perhaps it was the understanding that some stories are written not with words but with silence. Either way, they knew, deep down, even if they never spoke it aloud, that they were bound by something they could neither name nor escape. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Their connection deepened, and yet there was a shift. Friends began to notice subtle changes, a distant look, a hesitant smile, gestures that seemed to hold more than they revealed. It was as if an invisible hand were guiding them toward a path they couldn't see, as if their story were written long before they met, a story that neither one of them could alter. In the end, there were those who remembered them as friends, others as something deeper, but few knew the truth, if there ever was a truth to know. They had crossed paths in this life, woven together in ways that seemed to defy reason, and yet there were signs, whispers in the quiet, that hinted at something else, something that would change everything. It was the winter of 1894, in a secluded village nestled high in the mist-laden mountains of Provence, France. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the village itself, small, isolated, seemingly untouched by the passage of time, was tucked so deeply into the hills that it seemed hidden from the world itself. Here, silence lay heavy, broken only by the distant hum of the river that cut through the valley below, and the occasional whisper of the wind. In this village lived a young woman named Elise. She was known for her quiet beauty, though few ever saw her laugh or heard her speak more than a word or two at a time. Her presence was like that of a shadow, moving silently through the village, gathering wildflowers on the edge of the forest, or lingering at the riverbank as the sun dipped below the horizon. But those who looked closer would see something else, an intensity in her gaze, a longing that seemed to reach beyond the mountains, as though she were searching for something that could not be found here. Elise's days were spent in quiet labor, tending to her family's small cottage and gathering herbs and plants for remedies her mother sold in the village. To everyone else, Elise was just another young woman destined for a simple life, bound to the traditions of her ancestors. But there was one who saw her differently. His name was Lucien. He had come from another village, far to the south, seeking work, a new beginning perhaps, or perhaps an escape. No one knew for certain, and Lucien himself rarely spoke of his past, but it was clear, even to those who whispered behind his back, that Lucien carried secrets. Secrets that made him both intriguing and dangerous. Elise and Lucien first met on a cold autumn morning. She had been gathering herbs along the edge of the river, her hands numb from the chill, her breath visible in the frosty air. He had been passing by, his gaze distant, lost in thought. Their eyes met only for a moment, but in that instant something shifted. It was as though each saw a reflection of their own solitude, their own quiet longing in the other's gaze. Over time, their paths continued to cross, brief encounters by the river, in the market square, at the edge of the forest where the village met the wilderness. They would exchange only a few words, if any, but there was an understanding between them, a bond that grew in the silence. And yet, they both knew that what lay between them was forbidden. Elise was the daughter of a respected family, expected to marry someone from within the village, someone who shared her world, her roots. And Lucien was a stranger, an outsider, bound by neither loyalty nor tradition. As the weeks turned to months, their love grew in secret, fed by stolen glances and fleeting moments. They would meet under the cover of darkness, away from prying eyes, their whispers lost to the night, their laughter carried away by the wind. It was a love that thrived in the shadows, a love that neither could deny, even as they knew the price they would pay if they were discovered. In the end, they were bound by the same fate that brought them together, yet torn apart by forces beyond their control. Their love was never meant to exist in the daylight, never meant to endure. They lived as though in a dream, knowing that each moment might be their last, that each day brought them closer to the inevitable end, and yet they clung to each other, defying the unspoken rules, defying the fate that had already been written for them. As the days passed, Elise and Lucien grew ever closer, drawn together by the quiet understanding that neither could escape the loneliness that had long been their only companion. They spoke to each other in whispers, as if fearing their words might shatter the fragile world they had built in the shadows. But love, however beautiful, is rarely without its flaws. Though they loved each other deeply, both carried a hidden burden, secrets, fears, and doubts that they couldn't bear to share even with each other. Lucien, haunted by a past he never spoke of, held his pain close, an invisible wall that kept him just out of reach. And Elise, bound by duty to her family and village, was torn between her love for Lucien and the expectations that hung over her like a storm cloud. She feared the shame her love might bring, feared the whispers, the scorn, the loss of everything she had ever known, and yet she could not bear to let him go. They tried to keep their love hidden, but in a small village, secrets have a way of finding their way into the light. Rumors began to spread, whispers that carried like the wind through the narrow streets, whispers of the strange young man and the village girl who had been seen together under the cover of darkness. But the worst came not from the villagers, but from her own family. When her father learned of her forbidden love, the fury in his voice echoed through their small home, a rage born not only of tradition, but of a deep-seated fear of losing the respect of the community. Lucien, too, faced his own battles. The villagers treated him as an outcast, watching his every move with suspicion, their faces a mask of quiet hostility. And, as the pressure mounted, Lucien found himself haunted by the choices he had left behind, by the life he had fled, by a past that he could no longer keep hidden. In their isolation, Elise and Lucien found solace in each other, but even their love could not erase the pain that they both carried. They became like two halves of a broken soul, each trying to mend the other, each unable to heal the wounds that lay buried deep within. One evening, as the autumn leaves began to fall, they made a choice. They would leave the village behind, escape to a place where no one knew their names, where they could live in peace, free from the judgment that had haunted them since the beginning. They would take only what they could carry, leave under the cover of night, and never look back. But fate, as always, had other plans. Caught between love and duty, Elise hesitated. She looked to Lucien, her heart torn, her mind racing. She wanted to run, to leave everything behind, but her father's voice, filled with fury and pain, held her in place, anchoring her to the life she had always known. Their love, once so fierce and unwavering, had become a ghost, a memory that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Elise returned to her family, bound by duty and regret, her heart forever scarred by the love she had left behind. And Lucien, lost and alone, disappeared into the night, a shadow among shadows, a soul forever marked by the love he could never claim. For weeks after their last meeting, the silence between Elise and Lucien became a weight neither could bear to shake. She returned to the rhythm of her days, performing each task with a hollow sense of duty, her heart a hollow shell, emptied of the hope she had once clung to. Lucien, too, found himself wandering the empty paths beyond the village, his footsteps heavy, his gaze locked on the horizon, searching for something he could not name. Night after night, he would sit by the river where they had met, listening to the sound of the water as it whispered their memories back to him. But little did they know, their paths were not meant to end here. Fate, cruel and unforgiving, had one last trial for them both. It was a promise made in her childhood, an arrangement her family had hoped would secure their name and position. But to Elise, he was nothing more than a stranger, a figure from stories and letters, a name without a face. And now he had come to claim what he believed was his. Meanwhile, Lucien remained unaware of the storm that was about to break. Days passed, and with each passing moment, the pain of their separation grew sharper, cutting deeper. He found himself drawn back to the village, unable to escape the pull of her memory, haunted by the love he could not forget. But everything changed one cold autumn night. Lucien could no longer keep away, could no longer silence the voice that urged him to find her, to see her one last time. Driven by a longing he could not escape, he returned to the village, slipping through the shadows until he reached her window. They spoke without words, their gazes locked across the space between them, a silent understanding passing between them. But the silence could not last, and as the weight of everything they had lost settled upon them, the truth they had both tried to deny could no longer be ignored. In that brief, desperate moment, they confessed their love, their voices filled with a longing that was as fierce as it was heartbreaking. They knew they could not change the past, could not escape the fate that had been written for them, but in that moment, they were willing to defy it. But as they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the sound of footsteps shattered the stillness. Her father, her fiancé, the villagers. One by one, they emerged from the shadows, faces twisted with anger and betrayal. The man she was promised to stepped forward, his eyes dark with fury, and without a word, he drew his sword. In that final, tragic moment, Lucien knew he could not win, but he refused to bow to the fate that had been forced upon him. As her fiancé raised his sword, Lucien whispered her name one last time, his voice filled with a love that would outlast the tragedy that was about to unfold. And so, their story came to an end. Lucien's life was taken by the very world that had denied him, leaving Elise to live in the shadow of their love, her heart forever marked by the memory of the man who had dared to defy fate for her. And as the years passed, the village moved on, its people returning to their lives, their memories of Lucien and Elise fading like the autumn leaves. But for Elise, the pain never faded. She spent the rest of her days haunted by the love that had been taken from her heart forever bound to a memory, a ghost, a dream that would never come to pass. In the years that followed, Elise walked a path shadowed by memories, each step echoing the moments she and Lucien had shared, a constant reminder of the love that was both her salvation and her undoing. She became a figure of quiet sorrow in the village, her eyes forever fixed on a horizon no one else could see. She returned to the places they had once shared, searching for remnants of a love that had been cut short. In the quiet solitude of the forest, by the riverbank, and under the shadows of the mountains, she found traces of him, as though he were still lingering in those hidden spaces, watching over her. Everywhere she went, she felt his presence, a quiet, unseen force that seemed to guide her, to pull her toward the places where they had once been whole. And yet, with every step, the weight of his absence grew heavier, pressing down on her heart, a constant reminder of the love that had been stolen from her. It was as if time itself had conspired to remind her of him. The seasons passed, but each autumn brought with it a chill that settled into her bones, a reminder of that final night, of the love she had lost beneath the moonlit sky. She watched as the leaves fell, each one a memory, a moment that could never be reclaimed. But it was by the river, on the night of the first snowfall, that Elise felt the weight of her grief shift, as if the burden of years had grown too heavy to bear. And then, in the stillness, she felt it, a whisper, a touch, something that seemed to stir the air around her, as though Lucien himself were standing beside her, his presence as real as the snow that drifted down, settling like ghosts on the ground. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe he was there, that he had returned to her, that somehow, beyond the boundary of life and death, their love had bridged the distance between them. She closed her eyes, reaching out as if she might touch him, as if she might hold him once more. And in that moment, she understood the truth. He was gone, and she had been clinging to a memory, a shadow that could never be brought back. But in that same instant, she also realized that his love, though lost to the world, had never truly left her. She took the locket from her neck, holding it in her hands, her fingers trembling as she placed it gently on the ground, by the river where they had shared their first kiss. She knew that she could not hold on to him any longer, but in leaving this small part of him behind, she felt as though she were giving him a piece of her heart, a final gift. And, as she walked away, she felt his presence fade, not in sorrow, but in peace, as though he were guiding her toward a future she could finally embrace. She knew that his love would always be with her, a quiet strength that would carry her forward, even as his memory faded into the past. Elise never forgot him, but in time, her love for Lucien became a quiet part of her, a memory that no longer hurt, a story that had found its ending. And though the village moved on, though the years passed and the people who had once whispered about them grew old and gray, their love remained, a silent legend, a story that would be told long after she, too, was gone. As the final echoes of Lucien and Elise's story fade into the darkness, we're left with a question that lingers long after the screen has gone quiet. Can love truly transcend time? Can it endure beyond the barriers of fate, beyond the pain of separation? If this story moved you, if it made you think about the loves you've lost, the loves you've held close, or the loves that still echo in your heart, hit like and let us know you're here. Because sometimes the stories we carry inside us are the ones that bring us closer, that help us see we're not alone. Subscribe if you believe in love. Love that endures even when it hurts. Love that refuses to fade despite the passage of time. Because sometimes, even the most tragic love stories remind us that love is the one thing that never truly dies. It stays with us in the quiet moments, in the spaces between breaths, always waiting to be remembered. And don't forget, every story has its twists, its turns, its unexpected endings. Join us next time as we unravel another tale of love and loss. A story that will challenge everything you think you know about the heart. What if the next love is not lost, but found in the most unexpected place? Come and find out. Until then, hold on to your heart and never stop believing in the power of love, even when it seems impossible.